It is 1:45, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Audrey Goninen, and I'm here with my colleagues Melanie Hooper and Sandy Maddox, and today we're going to be sharing updates made to the Summer Reading Camp monitoring tool that are specifically aligned to MTSS. And we are putting in the chat a link to our digital agenda. It has links to the resources that you will review today. So you may want to open the file in another browser so that you can have easy access to them.
And it's already in the chat.
So recently we had the pleasure of reading this book by Adam Grant. It's titled Think Again, and it challenged us to rethink a lot of the structures and systems, strategies, and tools that we have used as educators in the past. It also started us to think again and ask, what if? What if small changes were made in summer reading camps that ended up making huge impacts in student achievement? So today we want you to begin to ask yourself what if and begin rethinking what is possible at summer reading camp. So in your digital agenda, you'll find a link to a Padlet. Love for you to take a moment to post a response to the question. If you were to reimagine summer reading camp, what would you do to ensure students received exactly what they needed to become successful readers and writers? So you have a few minutes to pull up the Padlet that's linked in the digital agenda and add your responses. Take time to look over your colleagues' responses, and also we'd love for you to share your thinking aloud with us. So feel free to unmute.
Hi, the link's not there for the digital agenda. It's not showing.
Oh, let me try and add it back in again. Okay, you should see it now.
Still not showing.
Not there.
It's not there. On my
Are you
end,
sharing it with everyone or just with someone in particular?
it looks like everyone. 1 second, let me just make sure. Yep, it says everyone. Audrey, can you see it?
I'm not seeing it either, so let me just pop over
I did
to,
it 4 times and it says everyone.
let me see.
So sorry.
Okay, I'm going to try right now.
Okay.
Thanks, Marie.
Yep. Should be there now. Yep.
So definitely feel free to unmute yourself as well to share your thinking of if you were to imagine summer reading camp, what would you do to ensure students received exactly what they needed to become successful readers and writers? I see Emma Ray White put in the chat, individual data would be used to provide targeted instruction and intervention. We are very like-minded, Miss White. Oh, that's Stacy White. Wonderful. We are very like-minded, so I'm glad you're here.
Anyone else?
All right.
There's some great things showing up on the Padlet.
See, like providing opportunities to read high quality, authentic text and supporting teachers in the knowledge and skills they need to provide appropriate interventions for the students. And also to provide intense and engaging reading activities that support them where they are and volumes of reading and writing in authentic ways. Those are all really good thoughts. Thank you for sharing.
Excellent. Very good. So in our rethinking of summer reading camp, how do we ensure that the summer reading camp meets the needs of each child? So I want to read to you a mission statement for summer reading camp. The mission is to accelerate a child's reading proficiency through very careful identification, implementation, and monitoring of a clear learning pathway. And that pathway is designed to meet the child's needs and to optimize their reading growth to achieve grade level mastery. Our goals for today: first, we'll demonstrate the updates and the tighter alignment to MTSS. And I really want to emphasize this alignment to MTSS. We might think about summer reading camp as just an extension of the school year. And so we're going to do more of the same thing. And it is tied to an MTSS process that is ongoing throughout the whole year. It's not something new that just pops up for the summer. Next, we'll look specifically at the updates through each part of the monitoring tool. We'll identify ways to determine learning pathways. Emphasis on learning pathways because multiple children, multiple learning pathways. And finally, we'll reflect on how these updates enhance the summer reading camp experience.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. The Summer Reading Camp Monitoring Tool and Rubric have been updated for 2022. We want to share this tool with you today. We will make note of any shifts in thinking within the document, and we will only highlight new information in today's session as we share our thinking behind the shifts. You can find the monitoring tool and other resources, again, linked to your digital agenda. Let's start with a historical perspective. Act 284, otherwise known as Read to Succeed, addressed interventions and supports that are provided to improve core instruction and student outcomes. Act 213 builds on that legislation by introducing a system of supports known as MTSS for students statewide. Provisos 1.60(1A)53 of the 21-22 state budget directed the South Carolina Department of Ed to provide literacy support to Palmetto Literacy Project schools, including professional development and curriculum resources. There are 230 schools in the PLP with approximately 5,500 teachers receiving professional development. Our purpose in updating the Summer Reading Camp Monitoring Tool was to align it to the legislation and to offer support to you in the field. The first section of the tool is entitled MTSS and is a new addition. The purpose of this section is to guide us in our thinking as we determine the areas of strengths and growth that children invited to summer reading camp will need. You are most likely already using data to inform instruction as a part of MTSS. Act 213 guides us in seeing MTSS as an overarching process that includes summer reading camp. We hope the resources provided today will guide you in preparing for summer reading camp. They are offered as support. You may already have a decision tree or a process in place. This process starts very early in the year with a close look at data. The classroom teacher and MTSS team would have determined that the child was not successful with grade level core instruction. Intervention would already be in place for a child invited to summer reading camp. Due to the limited number of hours that instruction can be provided in summer reading camp, a clear pathway of instruction needs to be planned ahead of time. This pathway is best determined by the child's teacher or teachers and the MTSS team. Once the goals and next steps for the child have been determined, the resources and personnel to meet these needs can be chosen. Progress monitoring tools can also be selected. You will find a helpful MTSS intervention decision tree that will be explained in a moment. You will also want to align your summer reading camp schedule of instruction to support the pathways that have been determined for each child. We want to optimize instructional time during summer reading camp in order to accelerate learning, as our mission stated. Careful planning is the key to a successful summer reading camp. You will find the MTSS pre-planning guide on page 1 of the monitoring tool, and I want to highlight a few of these important pre-planning measures. Summer reading camp planning involves the current student's teacher, and all data is analyzed to determine areas of strength and growth. Using the optional MTSS instruction intervention decision tree, instruction and resources such as curricula, personnel, materials, etc., are aligned to the areas of student need. Lessons are then developed that will support the instruction needed for each child according to the pathways determined. Progress monitoring times and tools will be determined. The majority of the time that a child spends in summer reading camp is used to accelerate learning based on student goals. The instructional routines of summer reading camp, such as read aloud, shared reading, small groups, etc., are also used to accelerate students' learning and specific goals. And lastly, I want to highlight a few post-planning thoughts. We want to update the child's lap folder with all pertinent information. Progress reports are provided to the child's parents, principal, and future teacher as to their progress in summer reading camp with identifiable next steps for the home and the classroom. And progress reports should also include an intervention plan for the upcoming school year, which should begin as soon as possible when they return to school.
So as we think about how to ensure summer reading camp meets the specific needs of each child, we can use the kindergarten through 5th grade intervention decision tree, which is found on page 2 of the monitoring tool. It is also available as a single document in the summer reading camp resources folder. This decision tree can assist in strategically identifying the learning targets for students that will help to accelerate their academic growth. So identifying student goals first begins by having the classroom teacher and school MTSS team looking at the student's universal screening data or benchmark assessment data. This is your first sweep to determine who may need to attend summer reading camp. Then from there, we must determine what are those underlying skills that are needed to propel the learner forward. So this can be accomplished by having the student complete an oral reading fluency assessment to determine if their reading is at a grade level standard. Included in the suggested resources, you're going to find a link to an article about oral reading fluency and grade level standards. This will help to determine if the child needs a learning pathway that's aligned to word recognition or language comprehension. If they're below grade level standards, then you'll want to give the students diagnostic assessments in the areas of phonological awareness and phonics. This is because oftentimes students present themselves as having difficulties with comprehension, but it's because they're just exerting a lot of cognitive energy to decode text that they then aren't able to comprehend what they're actually reading. So one question the teacher can ask themselves is, if I were to read this, read something aloud to the student, would they comprehend it? And if so, there isn't a language comprehension problem, but instead there's some type of difficulty within the word recognition strand. So to help you determine the specific areas of need, we have provided some suggested tools to utilize as a diagnostic assessment, along with resources specific to instruction for this learning pathway. Now, if the child is reading on grade level standards for oral reading fluency, then you'll want to determine an area or areas of need specific to language comprehension. Vocabulary, it accounts for approximately 60% of the variance in reading comprehension once students are able to decode the words in a text. So MTSS teams will need to reflect on how vocabulary is attributing to a student's lack of language comprehension. It's also going to be important to think about how a lack of background knowledge may attribute to a student's poor reading comprehension. And then we have the additional sub-skills within language comprehension, including written expression, use of strategies for self-monitoring, understanding text genres, the characteristics and features of text, ability to comprehend simple to complex sentences, and then the use of higher level reasoning skills.
To help MTSS teams determine the learning pathway for summer reading camp students, we've included suggested resources aligned to each area. These can be found on page 2 of the monitoring tool, and they're included in the summer reading camp resources folder.
You'll also find in the Summer Reading Camp resources folder, which is linked in your agenda. It's also on page 8 of the monitoring tool, a worksheet that could be used to identify and track the learning pathway of a student. So first, I want to ensure that everyone understands that all the materials in the resource folder are just that. They are resources. They're not required to be used, including this form. But as we review it, you may be thinking how it or your own version of something like this might be beneficial to your schools. So this tool is intended to be used by the school level MTSS team in collaboration with the child's classroom teacher all throughout the school year to guide intervention. The information discussed through the decision tree can be recorded on this document and provided to the summer reading camp. So then there's clear communication between the school and then the summer reading camp teacher, because we know that oftentimes the summer camp is not held at the home school for a child. And that's going to give that summer reading camp teacher clear information about the specific needs of that student. There's also a place for MTSS teams to craft SMART goals that are aligned to the learning pathway of each child, an area to plan for instructional materials and resources, including how and when to progress monitor, and a place for teams to record the outcomes and next steps. This is not something that should be used by the summer reading camp teacher at the beginning of summer reading camp as a planning tool, as they're going to be unfamiliar with the student and their data. Again, if you were choosing to use this, it would be a document that could be used throughout the school year in collaboration with the school's teacher and the MTSS team to determine and provide interventions leading all the way up to summer reading camp, and then to communicate to the summer reading camp about the students' goals. Okay, so recently the literacy coach Monica Polson from the Lancaster School District had an opportunity to review these resources and to reflect on how they might support student learning and teacher planning within her school. So let's listen to some of her ideas. And that's gonna start over.
Reading camps.
Let's go back.
I believe that the combination of the K-5 intervention decision tree and the summer reading camp student learning pathway form provides teachers and instructional coaches with an easy to follow process for drilling down through data to one specific skill that can be targeted during small group or individual instruction. Oftentimes, teachers can find it difficult to pinpoint the academic needs of those students who are a year or more behind their grade level expectation. So relying on these support documents could help teachers and instructional coaches alike to find and maintain that laser-like focus on the specific learning target for each student. I think with that laser-like focus, we'll see our students make more gains toward reaching their academic goals with regards to literacy. I appreciate the document space for learning outcomes and for creating more goals, because I believe this propels teachers into the cycle of the data-informed instructional model that's so important for us to rely on when considering assessments and next instructional goals for our students. We're eager to give it a go with our third grade teachers and see if it doesn't help us to impact student learning in a positive way. Thanks.
Okay, so now we've got to hear from Ms. Polson, but I'd love for you to now reflect on how you feel the intervention decision tree and support documents will then support teachers and summer reading camp coordinators in your districts. Your thoughts can be recorded on the Padlet, and I definitely encourage you to unmute and share your thinking as we all grow from one another.
Audrey, I'll share. Looking at the document, one thing that I immediately see on feedback is teachers truly want to find the target. Oftentimes finding the target is the challenge. And the reading process is complex. So I think it's a good guide for helping both the decision tree and the pathway. I'm excited to see that Monica's willing to try it. It'll be great action research from now, even before summer reading camp.
Yeah, definitely. Because we want the resources that we put out to be what's going to be beneficial for schools across the state. So any feedback, especially when you've tried it out, if you do, is much appreciated.
And Ms. White, starting now and practicing and using the tool and thinking through it now, great idea.
Well, this coach is in my district, and I will say they do not mind action research. They don't mind trying. You know, the one thing after I unmuted, it reminds me a lot of, I don't know if you've seen Nell Duke's form that she kind of created. The front reminds me of that, but I also do like her fluency piece on the back. We've realized in our district that oftentimes we overlook what fluency really is. So just like for our own, I love the resource. I'm even wondering how I could combine the fluency piece with it.
Any other ideas want to be shared? Or Wendy, do you see anything in the Padlet that was added?
Okay.
Let's keep going.
I believe that
Okay. So now we'd like to highlight the shifts in our monitoring tool. We'd now like to take some time to review the additional revisions that continue to answer the question, how do we ensure that summer reading camps meet the needs of each child? One way we can do this by looking at the instructional environment. In previous years, the monitoring tool has had language specific to a daily agenda and a schedule. So as we think about meeting the needs of each student, you'll see a necessary added component that the schedule supports. It's in italics over to the right. It says schedule supports differentiation based on students' areas of need identified through MTSS. So within your camp, you'll want to plan for numerous opportunities for students to receive differentiated instruction specific to those needs. You'll also notice that we've added language regarding access to decodable texts. As part of evidence-aligned instruction, Students must have ample opportunities to practice those decoding skills that they're learning within the word recognition learning pathway. Within the resources folder, you'll find links to free online decodable texts. But districts may be interested in investing in texts that align with the scope and sequence of phonics curriculums that they've chosen to utilize for summer reading camp. When we rethink summer reading camp learning materials, how do we ensure that they meet the needs of each child? When we think about those learning materials, you'll notice that changes to the first bullet within this section. First, it's important to note what evidence-based means. In order to be called scientific research, the methods of research must meet certain criteria. There must be research design where the students tested with an intervention are compared to control groups that don't receive the intervention. There must be high quality data analysis conducted. Studies must be peer reviewed and methods replicable before studies are actually published. So to say something is evidence-based is not the same as being researched. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, along with Elementary and Secondary Education Act, requires by law that curricula, programs, and practices used is based on scientifically based research. So what is italicized is new. It says curriculum uses direct and systematic instruction that's explicitly delivered. It's matched to student learning goals as determined through the MTSS process. And the materials are organized around a scope and sequence, moving from simple to more complex. And the resources are easily found by teachers.
Student and teacher engagement also contributes to the effectiveness and efficiency of learning for students in summer reading camp. Therefore, we've embedded some resources and added a few more components to include in your camps. So although vocabulary instruction is not new to the rubric, the addition of the embedded resources is. So on page 4, you'll find links to a Reading Rockets article that may be a great resource for professional development for your summer reading camp staff. It explains the principles used for selecting which words to explicitly teach. There's also a link to an example of explicit instruction and practice for vocabulary instruction. You'll also find 3 new additions. The first one, again, just emphasizes that importance of ensuring that students are engaged in instruction that is specifically meets their needs. And then, since the amount of time for summer reading camp is limited, it's essential that the time allocated is focused on instruction. Therefore, there is an addition of the indicator teacher utilizes all instructional time with an example of bell-to-bell instruction. Now, this is not to ignore the fact that transitions are going to occur, brain breaks are definitely needed, and special events are scheduled to just support the themes and excitement of the camp. But the goal is for teachers and the coordinators of the camp to really reflect on the amount of actual instructional time versus time that's just referenced in a schedule. Are all allocated minutes for literacy instruction actually instruction? And then finally, the addition of the indicator teacher uses practices that involve all students in responding, encouraging all students to formulate answers and participate has been included to encourage the use of multiple strategies for engaging all students. So for example, choral responses, every pupil responses, turn and talks, small group conversations. All of these should be used more routinely than teachers just calling on one student at a time to respond to a question. If teachers are not sure what this could look like, we've included a webinar where Dr. Anita Archer gives a variety of examples for ways to actively engage all students.
So at this time, let's reflect and discuss. Small shifts, but lots of information. So unmute yourself and share your triangle, circle, and square reflections. You might also be interested in sharing these reflections on the Padlet. So far, what are 3 important points you want to take back to your colleagues? What might be rolling around in your mind? Or what squares with your beliefs about summer reading camp?
Wendy, or if you're talking, you need to unmute.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the questions in the chat now that might be beneficial for the group is the state going to give us recommendations for curricula we use in summer reading camp?
Well,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Okay. At this time, we are not going to offer any guidance as far as curriculum for summer reading camp. What we really are trying to do is to encourage you to use that MTSS process. That is the main goal here. And so I hope that answers your question.
Sandy.
Hey.
Hey, it really doesn't, because I know in the past at this particular workshop, we've talked about different programs that districts have used or that have kind of been recommended, like Lit Camp.
Yes.
And so if you could tell us maybe what is evidence and research based then, or give us some guidelines with that. I mean, if that's in the tool and nobody's going to tell us what those programs are, then, you know, you're not helping us out with that. Sorry.
There are, so for instance, with one resource that we've linked in there for phonics is the West Virginia phonics lessons. So while it's not a curriculum, it is a tool that you could plug into a phonics piece. When you go on to the Tools for Reading website, it's a free sign up, and then you can link into the West Virginia phonics lessons, and it will give you a very scripted lesson that a teacher can follow with the decodables that follow. So that's kind of a plug and play piece that is research based. And that would follow your the phonics curriculum that you might need for just that piece. You're free to, I mean, we all, there's always value in interactive read alouds. So I feel certain that you probably have some kind of material in your building that you could use for interactive read alouds or shared reading. Where you might need some shoring up is either phonemic awareness. If you don't have something for that on the resources page, we have some links in there for some resources that you can use.
I have
Okay.
an idea
Okay, I'm sorry.
that I'm
That
really
answer your
excited.
question?
It did. I just know that, you know, if the tool has on there a place that's you're going to mark curricula is research based, then, you know, I don't want to be marked down if like the programs we use in our district right now are found in Simpanel, phonics and word study, interactive read aloud, those things, and they're not actually touted as being research based according to our state. So,
Well, you know, Lori, here's what I'll say. We're making shifts, okay? And so kind of hang on to that word. You know, today we haven't taken a deep dive into this tool for several years, and we really wanted to stress the MTSS and align it to the legislation. And so we felt like that was a good first step. And as we make shifts, we're not going to do what you just suggested. We're not going to check that off or not check that off. We just want to make sure that the resources that you do have available for summer reading camp are meeting the needs of the children that are there. And so that's going to be our main goal.
And if you weren't able to attend in the first session this morning, the Clover School District shared an amazing session on how they have embedded many of these ideas already, and they gave links to resources and materials that they use. So that might be another option to definitely go back and watch their session.
I believe I interrupted. Was it Dawn?
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry.
I really love this session and wanted to toss out how this would fit into our current plan for this year's summer reading camp. Last year, we revised SRC in Spartanburg District 6 to have an MTSS model where we had a tier 1 that used Scholastic Lit Camp, but we had a targeted tier 2 that was designed to meet individual students' needs and small group needs. But it was just a start. This community partnership grant helped me fund ESOL teachers that could really help meet our students who had needs in phonological and phonemic awareness. But I do feel like with the tools from this session, and I attended the session that Audrey spoke of this morning, how to really make sure that the classroom teachers who are teaching SRC are really targeting tier 1 and tier 2, because all of the students who come to my summer reading camp are significantly below grade level. So that goal setting sheet that really connects to the pathway, if that is done before summer reading camp with the assistance of the school's coach, the classroom teacher could have a data meeting just like we do during the school year in our MTSS meetings to really know these are the kids in your summer reading camp class so that we can target instruction. And we're in the same place that my colleague Laurie had shared. You know, we don't have one particular phonics program or curriculum, but we've created a scope and sequence aligned with shifting the balance and letters that 3 of our schools will go through this coming year. And we've aligned some targeted intervention resources that Sandy has helped us gather. So I think this year we won't be where we need to be, but we'll be better along using this process. I am requesting in this year's summer reading camp community partnership grant some funding to provide coaches, literacy coaches, to work in our SRC sites to help with this process, because they really know all of our students. They're a big part of our tier 2 intervention and our tier 1 when we have to do whole group intervention. There was a book study you guys did in the fall on effective universal instruction that helped us with that. But I do appreciate the tools in that folder, because for sure the pathway and for sure that decision tree are going to be part of the training provided to our coaches to help provide that data analysis and to co-construct that pathway with the current classroom teacher, so the SRC teacher really knows the needs of the student. And we're going to just do the best we can with the materials that we have. You know, we're going to get some PLP curriculum materials that we can integrate. But one thing that I've learned is there is no one program that's going to fit a specific grade level. This work with Sandy Maddox and our PLP schools, every group has different needs across a phonics scope and sequence. Like in one 3rd grade class at one of our PLP schools, I've got kids who are newcomers who are pre-A, that Fontes and Pinnell and LLI is never going to work. They've got a pre-A phonological and phonemic awareness intervention going on. And then I've got 8 kids who are 2 grade levels below in one class due to COVID and opportunity gaps. And then I've got some who are on or above. So I really like how this is building teacher capacity for understanding data, and then also helping us identify where we need to plug in resources. So I'm thinking it's going to be several years before we put all the pieces together, but this helps us get better than we were before, where everybody did lit camp. We all did the same thing. We made some gains, but I think this will definitely help us be specific and targeted. So I appreciate it.
We couldn't have said it better. Perfect.
Thank you, Dawn.
Dawn,
Hey,
what
Laurie,
is the name of
that
the book?
book? And just a real quick plug, it's this one right here. It's Effective Universal Instruction. And chapter 6 is the game changer. I couldn't go to all the live sessions due to my schedule. I got to attend 2, but I read the book. My 3 PLP teachers read the book, and chapter 6 has a section where it really talks about targeting your interventions, that you really can't rely on just LLI or just F&P because there are kids who don't fit that mold. And there's a section called whole group interventions, where if 40% of your students are below grade level on a skill, you can allow the classroom teacher to do a whole group intervention. It's temporary. It's not remediation where you like everybody just teaches a grade level below. But this has redefined, like at our school that has a high ESL population, we're able to target phonemic awareness in that 3rd grade classroom, even though that's not 3rd grade standards, because I've got 75% of the students who are at a kindergarten second 9 weeks level according to our scope and sequence. So during that phonics workshop, that's what the teacher does. And then during tier 2, she differentiates for the kids who are above and below. So we've really been able to redefine our understanding of intervention, and we have a long way to go. I'm trying to plug in materials as they need. But
Well, Dawn, I want to just thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing.
well said. Mhm.
And I can hear your passion, but also the hope that is there, that making these small shifts little by little is going to end up making some big changes. So Melanie, you want to keep going with a few of our continued shifts?
Absolutely. So individual, small group, and whole group instruction. How do we enhance summer reading camp for the learning for each of these children? So the word differentiated is of essence here, and the words universal screeners and diagnostic assessments, they have been added to this. If we think of summer reading camp as an intervention to accelerate student learning, it becomes necessary to find out what skills or strategies need accelerating. So the only way to know how to target the instruction is to know where the deficient skills lie. So a thorough review of diagnostic assessments will provide a clear point of entry for targeted instruction. There are links, again, provided in the suggested resources section of the monitoring tool to assist in efforts to differentiate the instruction for students. How do we ensure independent practice during summer reading camp maximizes the learning for each child? The purpose of independent practice is to practice what's already been learned. It could be writing, it could be a game, a phonemic activity, or independent reading. The goal of the practice time is for students to practice successfully. Once teachers have worked with students and built capacity with a skill, it's important that the teacher gradually release. While this term is familiar to us, we feel the need to stop and clarify further. By gradual release, we mean that teachers have modeled. Teachers have given over the practice to students to observe them to ensure they're practicing correctly before releasing students to independent practice. And again, reemphasizing that if a student needs to reinforce phonics skills that have been previously taught, or yes, previously learned, a link to free decodables is provided on the resource page.
Within the monitoring student progress section, you will notice that the word routinely has been added to the indicator of adding data to the LAP folder. Oftentimes when out in the field, we'll see LAP folders being used to collect summative data regarding instruction or intervention. And although this information is important to include in a student's LAP folder, it's also important to add information that's specifically focused on progress monitoring. So at a recent Core Pivot Learning webinar, the host shared that progress monitoring is all about answering the question, are students benefiting or improving from this intervention? So if so, we want to continue the intervention or adjust the goals. But if not, we don't want and we don't have the ability to waste instructional time. Instead, the intervention needs to be adjusted or the goals fine-tuned to ensure that instruction is focused specifically on what that student needs. CORE suggested that for students who are significantly behind or considered at risk, which would be these students attending during summer reading camp, progress monitoring should be weekly or at least biweekly. This time frame would be, of course, depend on the length of your camp. Now, communication about a student's progress is also important, and parents especially need support in understanding how the decision tree how that is used to determine the summer reading camp instruction. And they're going to need to have routine updates about how their child is progressing with their identified goals. Then at the conclusion of summer reading camp, the principal and the next year's teacher would definitely benefit from the progress report and an outline of the identifiable next steps for the home and classroom. So this is a great opportunity to use that K-5 literacy intervention student learning pathway tool that was discussed earlier, or any other type of information or documentation form that your district uses.
So how do we ensure that the summer reading camp visits are focused on using the instructional practices that meet student needs? As we've said before, the MTSS process, it's a data-based decision-making process. It starts with using screener data that identifies our most vulnerable students at risk. And once those students are identified, the diagnostic data is used to identify the deficit skills the students need to recover. Summer reading camp is the vital intervention that we use to treat those deficits for our most vulnerable and at-risk students. So it's critical that this process work effectively in accelerating the student learning as we intend it to. The MTSS process, it's the same, Dawn mentioned it earlier, it's the same process that we've been using all throughout the school year. In addition to visiting classrooms, during the summer reading camp visit, we're going to also want to discuss 2 or 3 case study students as prescribed through the MTSS decision-making tree. Specifically, we want to discuss the screener data and how that was used for identification, what instructional needs the diagnostics revealed, what instructional treatments those students are receiving, and whether the data from progress monitoring tools indicates that the instructional treatments are actually working. Diagnose, prescribe, and treatment are words used in the medical community to describe a tightly connected system put in place to monitor patient health and response to treatment. So using the same language, the MTSS process is designed to prescribe the most effective instruction for our most at-risk students to ensure that those treatments are having the intended effects. How do we ensure the fundamentals of reading are secured and strong? Here are some new additions on the monitoring tool. Long-standing models of effective reading instruction have caused us to rethink our practices. So in turn, it's led us to shifts within the fundamentals. In this section, first, you'll see the simple view of reading model, and it's overlaid with the reading rope. And it's a balanced equation for successful and accomplished readers. So if a student has mastery over word recognition and language comprehension, they're a proficient reader. 1 times 1 is 1. However, 1 times 0 is 0, and 0 times 1 is 0. So in other words, if a student is deficient in one area, proficiency in the other will never equate to a proficient reader. Deficits in either must be diagnosed accurately in order to treat them effectively. If a student is diagnosed with a phonemic deficit, then a treatment of phonemic instruction is prescribed. The converse is also true. If a student is diagnosed with a deficit in language comprehension, then a treatment of comprehension strategy is prescribed. Next, the National Reading Panel's report concluded that reading instruction must include all 5 pillars. And in the same vein as the simple view of reading, it takes the structural integrity of all 5 pillars to stand strong and endure over time. Phonemic awareness and phonics are the keys to the alphabetic code. With accuracy and automaticity in phonemic awareness and phonics, then students can build reading fluency. As the fluency builds, the vocabulary of a reader multiplies exponentially, paving the way to increasingly strategic comprehension. With these 2 models guiding what we know to be essential to reading, the Institute for Educational Science has written a really practical educator's guide that provides very specific recommendations for specific reading challenges our learners might face. Again, all of the fundamentals of reading resources can be found linked on page 8 of the Summer Reading Camp monitoring tool, and it might be beneficial as part of your district's PD for summer reading teachers.
So we want to thank you for your time today and your attention and your engagement in this session. And in the remaining few minutes, take a moment to reflect on the rethinking we've done together about summer reading camp as an MTSS intervention. So I'm going to give you about 60 seconds of quiet pondering, and then I'll say time, and then everyone is invited to type in the chat or unmute yourself and share aloud a question that you still have, an idea that's been sparked, or a possibility that you are giving serious consideration for your upcoming camp. So we'll go ahead and start time for just this quiet reflection. Okay, it's been a minute, so please feel free to share your ideas aloud, or if Wendy, you can share some ideas from the Padlet or the chat.
Or if you have any questions you'd like for us to answer.
I think there's just one thing I want to like clarify in my mind. I'm hearing evidence-based, and one of the things that I know from my PhD is that there are some things that you can't do a control group, like independent reading. You cannot remove books from a classroom library, and we say books matter and kids seeing themselves in books matter. You can't take away from a group something that you believe to be in their best interest. You can't have a control group to really study independent reading in advance of publishing. However, there is volumes of data about the power of independent reading. So as we go down this evidence-based road, and I certainly understand what you're saying, I want us just to be really clear that there are practices in place. Gradual release responsibility was put into place. And then, I mean, so we have to be really careful about that word and what is studied, and also knowing that ethically, you can't, IRB would never give you permission to do something that allows you to withhold something that you believe is good from a student. And so I'm all about doing what's very best for kids, and I'm all about having the very best materials. and the very best work and having a very balanced pillar, all the pillars in place. I just want us to keep that in mind, because if you came down to it, independent reading is not evidence-based. Neither is the classroom library.
Robin, thanks for that comment. And in the language for the guidance for the IDEA law that I stated there, it says whenever possible. So there's an understanding that not every study is going to be able to follow that. Well, it's just as you said, you're not going to be able to have a control group.
Thank you for saying that, because I think that's been left out sometimes. And I'm all about, and I loved the session that Clover did, or that Chester did on letters. And I just want us to be really clear that to the degree possible.
And that's exactly, I believe that's exactly how it's stated. So we wanted to make sure that we highlighted the language evidence-based and tried to highlight what that means. Because we as educators have trusted when something says research-based, and we have found ourselves down roads that we didn't do a lot of thinking for ourselves. We trusted. So just trying to hand over that responsibility back to the people who were in the classroom.
Yeah, that's very good. And I think too that, when we talk about shifts within this document or this monitoring tool, we really are more focused on the children than the programs. Okay. And so we want those children to be in that MTSS process from the minute that they are not, well, first of all, we want them accessing core instruction. And I know you're all familiar with that, but we want you, if you walk away with anything today, we want you to see summer reading camp as simply a continuation of where that child was at the end of school going into camp, and summer reading camp is under that umbrella of MTSS. And so we still have about 3 minutes. If anybody else has any more questions, we can stay on for a couple of minutes, and you have our emails there too. Any more